Happening right now, family, friends, and colleagues are gathering to celebrate the life of Ed Daniels.
The longtime New Orleans sports broadcaster died last week after suffering a heart attack weeks earlier. WWL Sports Director Doug Mouton joining us live tonight at Rock and Bowl, where that celebration is still taking place at this hour. Doug?
Oh, yeah, it absolutely is, Katie. And look, I want to say this right off the bat. I'm not claiming any journalistic objectivity when it comes to Ed Daniels. I interned for Ed in the 80s, worked with Ed for 13 years. He has been a wonderful friend to my wife Jamie and I for almost 40 years now. And the outpouring of support for Ed today has been unbelievable. Hundreds of people turned out at St. Philip Neri in Kenner for the funeral services, and then hundreds more and a lot of different faces here at Rock and Bowl for what they've built as the celebration of Ed's life. Ed touched so many lives. We saw hundreds of high school coaches and journalists, sportscasters, sports writers from across the state of Louisiana. The outpouring of support has been enormous, and it's been that way since Ed had his heart attack a few years ago. I caught up with a couple of Ed's closest friends a few minutes ago.
There's an awful lot to say about him as a journalist. Hard work and dedicated, passion. But here's the thing, Doug. I get a little choked up, but here's the thing. He's a far better man than he was a journalist. And people do not do what they've done over the last 2 or 3 weeks just because he was a great journalist.
I'm surprised that so many people knew he was a softie, that he really was, he was the biggest cream puff that you ever want to see. Okay, he really was.
In a good way.
Yeah, no, and I'm saying that in a good way, because you always have this serious, no-nonsense facade, but that was him. But I'm surprised that many people knew about that other side.
Yeah, Ed was what you would call a grinder, one of the hardest working people I have ever seen or ever been around. It was inspiring to watch when I was young and wanted to get into this business. The city is remembering Ed Daniels tonight. There's a lot of sad faces, and this party at Rock and Bowl was supposed to end at 5. There's no end in sight at this point as people are remembering Ed. For now, reporting live at Rock and Bowl, Doug Mouton, WWL Louisiana. We'll see you in sports.
All right, Doug, I know this had to be a difficult day for you and TJ and so many of us here at Channel 4 and our family who knew Ed so well. And earlier in the day, thousands of people paid their respects to Ed's family at St. Philip Neri in Metairie.
Yeah, many of them were people in the sports community, from the Saints organization to former high school athletes who Ed covered, and people in the sports media who covered games with him. Mourners called him a pioneer who shined a spotlight on high school football athletes and covered Friday night games.
He saw the value of high school sports. He loved high school sports. We loved it as kids. And when everybody else thought it was persona non grata to cover high school sports, he saw the vision, he presented it to his ownership. At the time, they kind of laughed about it, much like I did in radio. And I think we proved to people 33, 34 years later that it was a really smart investment.
Everyone agreed that Daniels worked long hours to make their coverage successful. His model became a model for high school coverage across the state. Ed Daniels was a husband, a father, and grandfather.
And we'll, of course, have continuing coverage of today's celebration of Ed Daniels' life. You can look for more tonight at 6. You can find more tributes to the late sportscaster on our website and our social media pages.